What happens when the monster you helped unleash finally sums up courage and turns his rage on you? Just weeks ago, Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu were expected to be allies, bound by blood, legacy, and the fallout of the Bloodline civil war. But backstage at SmackDown, cameras caught Hikuleo doing what no one dared, stepping directly into Jacob Fatu's path. Sources say Hikuleo didn't flinch. He stood inches from Fatu and said, "This isn't your kingdom." No fists thrown. Just a stare. A warning. You could feel the walls shake. This wasn't about ego. This was about identity, who really carries the family name with honor. Jacob didn't respond with violence. He smiled. Then walked off. What does that mean? Respect? Fear? Or something way worse? Don't forget to smash that subscribe button, and drop a comment down below who you think is going to win if these two collide again. What would you do if the very monster you helped unleash turned around, looked you dead in the eye, and said, "This isn't your kingdom"? No punches. No shouting. No chaos. Just 6 words. Spoken by a man built like a war machine, whose bloodline is soaked in wrestling history. 6 words that froze a locker room, shattered expectations, and made the walls of SmackDown feel like they were closing in. We all thought Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu were going to be allies, blood brothers by legacy. They were supposed to be the new order rising from the ashes of the Bloodline civil war. Reigns fades, Solo stands. Jacob enters. Hikuleo backs him. That was the prediction. That was the fantasy. Until last Friday, when reality hit like a chair shot to the spine. And now, everything's changed. Backstage footage leaked, no production crew, no kayfabe, no pre-taped promo. Just raw, uncut confrontation between 2 men who have every reason to be on the same side, and now, maybe on a collision course. Hikuleo didn't hesitate. He walked into Fatu's space and dropped a bomb, "This isn't your kingdom." And Jacob didn't fight back. He smiled. That's it. No response. No threat. Just that sinister smirk and a slow walk away, like a man who heard what he needed to hear and decided to wait. You could cut the tension with a knife. You could feel the meaning behind every second. And for fans who followed the Bloodline saga, who've watched the Samoan dynasty rise and fall through Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, the Usos, and now Jacob Fatu, this wasn't just a backstage moment. This was a declaration of war. To understand why that stare down is one of the biggest powder kegs WWE has ever teased, you have to know who these men are, and what they represent. Jacob Fatu isn't just a beast in the ring. He's chaos incarnate. An unhinged, high-impact heavyweight who moves like a cruiserweight and hits like a demolition truck. He comes from the Inoue family, the same bloodline as Roman Reigns, The Rock, Rikishi, the Usos, and Yokozuna. He's the son of Sam Fatu, aka the Tonga Kid. And he's been carving out a rep in MLW as one of the most unpredictable, unstoppable forces in modern wrestling. When Jacob debuted on WWE TV, it wasn't a debut. It was a detonation. He stormed in like a one-man riot, throwing bodies like ragdolls, and immediately set his eyes on rebuilding the bloodline, but in his own image. Not Roman's corporate dynasty. Something meaner. Wilder. Realer. Now let's talk about Hikuleo. Hikuleo is no undercard project. He's the son of Haku. One of the most feared men to ever walk into a wrestling ring. Old-school fans know Haku wasn't just tough, he was feared in real life. There are backstage legends about Haku that would make your jaw drop. Hikuleo inherited that aura, that rage under the surface. In New Japan Pro Wrestling, Hikuleo wasn't flashy. He wasn't flashy because he didn't need to be. He was the enforcer. The one who ended feuds with chokeslams and stare-downs. Bullet Club may have been the brand, but Hikuleo was the wall no one wanted to run into. So why does this moment matter? Because Jacob Fatu represents fire, and Hikuleo represents ice. One burns down empires. The other waits in silence before he explodes. One screams chaos, the other speaks calm, but both are monsters in their own right. And for a brief moment, they were standing face to face, not as brothers, but as rivals. Not as allies, but as potential threats. And there wasn't a single punch thrown, because that would have been too easy. Too simple. This wasn't about ego. This was about identity. This was about who really gets to represent the family name with honor. Who deserves to lead? Who carries the legacy forward? And in that second, when Hikuleo said, "This isn't your kingdom," he wasn't talking about the locker room. He wasn't talking about the bloodline. He was talking about the tribe. The heritage. The legacy. He was telling Jacob, "You think you're the heir. I'm here to remind you there are others who were born to rule." Here's where it gets even more complicated. Jacob didn't fight. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even show anger. He just smiled. Now you tell me, what's more terrifying? A man who throws a punch? Or a man who hears a threat and just grins? That smile wasn't nothing. That smile was everything. Was it a challenge? Was it a promise? Was it a warning? Because Jacob Fatu has never backed down from a fight. He's dropped legends. He's snapped steel barriers in half with his bare hands. He's taken on factions alone. But when Hikuleo stepped into his space and called him out, not physically, but spiritually, Jacob didn't swing. He waited. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most dangerous thing of all. WWE has always played with storylines based on betrayal, brotherhood, and legacy, but this? This is a powder keg sitting in the middle of a Samoan war zone. There's no Roman to mediate. No Paul Heyman to scheme. No Usos to unify. Just two men who are ready to become the new face of the family, and there's only one throne. So the question isn't will they fight? The question is, what happens when they do? And who walks away when the smoke clears? Because here's the real truth. Every generation of the Anoa'i dynasty has been marked by one thing, a turning point. A moment where one member steps forward and redefines what it means to be the one. Roman Reigns did it with Tribal Chief. The Rock did it with charisma and crossover superstardom. Rikishi made it with attitude and impact. Now it's Jacob or Hikuleo. One will carry the torch. The other? May be forced to be the warning story future generations tell. So buckle in, because we're just getting started. In the next chapter, we're going to break down how we got here. The Bloodline Civil War. The Exodus. The Chaos. The New Order. But for now, ask yourself this. What happens when the blood that binds you becomes the blade that breaks you? This is not about championships anymore. This is about legacy. And someone's about to lose theirs. The rise and fracture of the bloodline didn't just reshape WWE, it redefined the way legacy functions in wrestling. For over 3 years, Roman Reigns ruled SmackDown like an emperor, surrounded by a faction that was as loyal as it was lethal. The Usos were the generals. Solo Sikoa, the silent assassin. Paul Heyman, the mouthpiece of power. And through it all, Reigns declared himself the tribal chief, the head of the table, the alpha male in a family of lions. But even kings bleed. Even thrones crack. And what began as dominance eventually turned into rebellion. The bloodline civil war was inevitable. Too many egos. Too much pressure. Too many secrets. It started with tension between Roman and Jey Uso. The very idea that family could turn on family set the entire wrestling world on edge. And once Jimmy followed, the spiral began. Chairs were thrown. Alliances shattered. Promos turned personal. The Usos walked away. Solo stayed, but with suspicion in his eyes. And then Jacob Fatu entered. Jacob wasn't part of the original bloodline narrative. He wasn't showing up every week, standing behind Roman with folded arms. He was doing his own thing in MLW, carving up his own path with violence and unpredictability. But insiders always knew his time would come. You don't keep a weapon like that in the holster forever. When Jacob debuted, he didn't ease in. He destroyed. The minute he appeared on screen, it felt like a shift in energy. A bigger, meaner kind of bloodline was on the horizon, one that didn't answer to Roman Reigns, or anyone else. No designer suits. No acknowledgement ceremonies. Just carnage. And yet, the question loomed, who would stand with him? Enter Hikuleo. For weeks, speculation swirled. Would Hikuleo join WWE? Would he align with Fatu? They shared heritage. They shared family. But they didn't share history, at least, not recent history. Hikuleo had been busy in NJPW, tangled up with Bullet Club politics, building his name on international soil. But even there, he always felt like a man apart. Too big for the mid-card. Too grounded for theatrics. Too dangerous to ignore. The moment Hikuleo was rumored to be heading to WWE, everything changed. Fans started to connect the dots. If Fatu was building a new bloodline, Hikuleo was the perfect lieutenant. Bigger than most, stoic, a monster in waiting. The assumption was clear, these two were going to reshape the family legacy as a tag team of destruction. And yet, that assumption ignored a key piece of context: legacy doesn't always unite. Sometimes, it divides. The Anoa'i and Fatu dynasties are vast. Everyone's related. Everyone's got a cousin, a brother, a nephew in the business. But proximity doesn't mean unity. The family tree has roots, but those roots twist in different directions. Hikuleo is the adopted son of Haku, also known as Mang, a legendary figure in wrestling and widely feared behind the scenes. Stories about Haku are the stuff of myth, tearing out a man's eye in a bar fight, fighting multiple attackers without breaking a sweat, having his name whispered in reverence by every tough guy in the locker room. Growing up under that shadow, Hikuleo didn't just inherit strength. He inherited discipline. He learned silence is power. He learned that real dominance doesn't come from screaming, it comes from being the storm that others dread approaching. He was raised not just as a wrestler, but as a warrior. Jacob Fatu? A different story. Born into chaos. Forged in rebellion. His wrestling style is an extension of his personality: high speed, high risk, high impact. He doesn't walk to the ring. He stalks. He doesn't sell pain. He weaponizes it. Where Hikuleo is calm before the strike, Jacob is the strike before calm ever has a chance. So what happens when two monsters from the same bloodline decide they're not on the same side? WWE has never been shy about playing with heritage. They understand the power of legacy, especially in families as iconic as this one. But what's different now is the vacuum of power. Roman is absent. He's not defending titles. He's not present week to week. The empire he built is crumbling without a ruler. Solo Sikoa may be stepping up, but he's not universally accepted yet. He's young, quiet, and proven as a real leader. The Usos are fractured. Heyman is surviving. And into this vacuum steps Jacob Fatu, a man who doesn't want to rule in Roman's image. He wants to burn it all down and start over. But Hikuleo? He doesn't want to build on Jacob's ashes either. That's where the tension ignites. Not from betrayal. Not from an attack. But from a philosophical divide. Jacob sees chaos as power. He believes the family was soft under Roman. All talk, not enough terror. He wants the bloodline reborn, not with honor, but with fear. He wants dominance through destruction. Hikuleo sees legacy differently. To him, legacy is earned. It's not about being loud. It's about being respected. Feared, yes, but through integrity. Through personal code. through knowing when to strike and when to stay silent. And Jacob? He broke that code the moment he tried to reshape the family in his image. So when Hikuleo walked backstage and stepped into Jacob's path, it wasn't a stunt. It wasn't storyline fluff. It was a line in the sand. He didn't say much. But he didn't need to. This isn't your kingdom. 6 words that now echo through the entire WWE universe. And that's what fans, pundits, and even other wrestlers are beginning to realize: this isn't just a feud. It's not just another faction fight. This is a clash of ideologies between two men who both believe they're the rightful heirs to a wrestling legacy that spans generations, continents, and championships. Jacob represents Fury Unleashed. A living reminder that the Samoan dynasty doesn't need diplomacy to thrive, it needs destruction. Hikuleo represents Force with Purpose. A man who believes legacy should be carried with pride, not chaos. And here's where things get even messier: WWE needs a new dominant story. With Roman gone, the main event scene is a revolving door. The fans are starving for structure, someone to believe in, or fear, or both. Fatu and Hikuleo are tailor-made for that spotlight. But there's only room for one to lead. The WWE Universe is asking the same question: who deserves to be the next tribal chief, the new face of the dynasty? Is it the man with the smile of a killer and the record of a destroyer? Or is it the silent giant who doesn't need the spotlight, just the respect? That question will define the next era of WWE. And what makes it even more electrifying is that no one saw this coming. Everyone expected Hikuleo to fall in line. To back the family. To stand beside Jacob in war. Instead, he stepped in front of him. And the story hasn't even started yet. In the next section, we break down exactly what happened backstage when that confrontation unfolded. Every second. Every stare. Every beat of tension. The camera didn't catch much. But what it did catch is now being dissected frame by frame. Because when monsters meet, the room changes. And when they decide they're no longer on the same side, the entire industry feels the tremor. It happened in silence. No dramatic music. No official segment. No spotlight. Just a shaky handheld camera, the hum of fluorescent lights, and 2 towering figures inches apart in a backstage hallway. And yet, somehow, it was louder than anything said in the ring that night. At approximately 9:42 p.m. EST, during a commercial break on SmackDown, WWE's internal camera feed picked up an unplanned moment behind the curtain. The footage, which was never aired officially but leaked within hours, captured Jacob Fatu exiting the locker room area alone. No entourage. No Solo. No Paul Heyman. Just Fatu, already looking like he had business on his mind. What happened next? That's the moment fans are now calling one of the most chilling encounters in modern WWE history. From stage right, Hikuleo appeared. No music. No lights. No camera crew following. Just presence. The kind of presence you don't teach in promo class. The kind that hits the air like a drop in temperature. He didn't call out Jacob. He didn't charge in with fists. He stepped forward. Deliberate. Calculated. And stopped just shy of chest to chest with Fatu. You can see the tension on the security guard's face in the background. He inches forward, unsure if he's about to be caught between 2 freight trains with no brakes. Jacob doesn't move. He locks eyes. And then it happens. Hikuleo leans forward, calm but loaded, and says 6 words. This isn't your kingdom. And that's it. No escalation. No physicality. Just tension so thick it should have had its own segment. Then, Jacob smiles. Slowly. Not a happy smile. Not a mocking one either. Something colder. Something closer to acknowledgement? Or maybe calculation. He doesn't break eye contact. Doesn't blink. Just a smirk, and a slow step backward. Then another. Then he turns. And walks off. The whole thing lasts 22 seconds. But it shattered expectations in 22 seconds flat. Let's break down what those 22 seconds meant, moment by moment. First, the location. This wasn't a production area. This wasn't where WWE stages cinematic showdowns. This was the industrial corridor between locker rooms and catering. No crowd. No set dressing. Just concrete, pipes, crates, and a few startled crew members. In other words, real estate that doesn't lie. The kind of space where real confrontations happen. Where tension doesn't have to be written in script notes. Second, the silence. WWE rarely lets silence do the heavy lifting. Promos are often padded with crowd noise, music beds, and cutaways. But this? This had none of that. You could hear every footstep. Every breath. Every hum of the ventilation system. The silence wasn't empty. It was electric. It screamed. And that's what made it so powerful. Silence meant no filters. No manipulation. Just raw presence. Third, the quote. "This isn't your kingdom." That line wasn't chosen at random. It's loaded. The word kingdom in WWE's modern tribal narrative is symbolic. Roman Reigns ruled as the tribal chief, not just as a champion, but as a monarch. He wasn't just the top guy, he was the acknowledged ruler of a blood-bound empire. His entire persona was built on the idea that the family kingdom lived and died by his hand. When Hikuleo said that line, he wasn't just challenging Jacob's current role. He was denying his right to succession. He was declaring Jacob an imposter to the throne. And that line hurt because it came from someone who should be in Jacob's corner. That's the most striking thing about this entire incident. Hikuleo and Jacob aren't just two tough guys with similar builds. They share a cultural bond. A family bond. Their fathers fought side by side. They were raised in similar traditions. They speak the same language, literally and metaphorically. So when Hikuleo chose not to back Jacob, it wasn't just betrayal. It was treason. And Jacob knew it. You can see it in the way his smile creeps across his face. It's not joy. It's recognition. He knows what just happened. This wasn't a challenge. This was an announcement. The old order isn't returning. A new power is forming. And Hikuleo might be the face of it. Now let's talk about the smile. A lot of fans misread that moment. They saw Jacob grin and assumed it was weakness. That maybe he didn't want to fight. But if you know Fatu's history, you know that smile means one thing: escalation. Jacob doesn't swing first when something big is on the line. He lets the insult settle. He lets it ferment. Then, when it's most painful, he explodes. Ask anyone who watched him in MLW. He lets his opponents believe they've struck a nerve. He lets them believe they have momentum. And then he obliterates them. That smile isn't peace. It's the calm that comes when a man already knows what comes next, and is ready to enjoy the suffering. So what comes next? Let's piece together what we know from backstage sources and insider leaks. According to multiple production staff who requested anonymity, the confrontation wasn't in the script. That's not to say it wasn't greenlit. WWE is known for approving moments that feel organic, but this wasn't scheduled to air. It wasn't blocked, rehearsed, or timed. It happened while a match was happening in the ring, which means someone made a choice to stage it off camera. Whether it was Hikuleo or Jacob, or both, it was deliberate. Even the camera crew filming it wasn't part of a typical segment team. That's why the footage was grainy. It wasn't lit properly. There were no boom mics. This was either a leak or a guerrilla-style setup designed to let the moment breathe without WWE fingerprints all over it. That makes it feel more dangerous. More unpredictable. Because WWE's most iconic storylines don't begin in the ring. They begin in moments like this. Stone Cold flipping off Vince McMahon in an unscripted promo. The Shield's first attack. CM Punk's pipe bomb. These were moments that broke through the screen because they felt real. And this moment? This confrontation between Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu? It has the same DNA. It's not just a feud. It's a collision of philosophies. Jacob Fatu wants to rebuild dominance through aggression. Hikuleo wants to protect what the legacy was before it was exploited. One wants control through destruction. The other wants stability through respect. And the scary part? They're both right. That's what makes this so dangerous. There's no villain. No clear hero. Just two heirs to a broken throne, each believing they're the one to rebuild it. Jacob smiled. But that smile could mean anything. It could mean respect. Acknowledgement of Hikuleo's guts. A test passed. Or it could mean revenge. A mental note filed away. And here's where it gets terrifying. Fatu doesn't retaliate with words. He retaliates with action. Weeks later. When you're not expecting it. When you've already lowered your guard. Which means Hikuleo's made a move, but he may not have won anything yet. The locker room knows this. You can feel it in interviews. Watch how other superstars speak when asked about the encounter. There's hesitation. There's nervous laughter. No one wants to pick a side. Because siding with Hikuleo means opposing Jacob Fatu, and Jacob has a memory like a steel trap. On the other hand, backing Jacob could mean going against Hikuleo. One of the most physically imposing and underutilized threats in WWE's roster right now. This isn't just a feud. It's a political earthquake. In the next chapter, we'll analyze exactly what this confrontation tells us about what's really going on beneath the surface. The symbolism. The power dynamics. The message being sent not just to each other, but to the entire WWE universe. For now, here's what you need to remember. The silence was louder than any promo. The quote was deadlier than any chair shot. And the smile? The smile may have been the beginning of something far worse than a fight. When a confrontation lasts less than 30 seconds, but dominates headlines for weeks, you know it wasn't just about words or posture. The moment between Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu wasn't random, accidental, or even just emotional. It was a message. And if you know how to read between the silences, it becomes clear, this wasn't about ego. It was about identity. In professional wrestling, especially in a family dynasty like the Anoa'i and Fatu bloodline, there are unspoken codes. Status isn't just earned in the ring, it's lived. Breathed. Inherited. Defended. And when that legacy is disrupted or challenged, the consequences echo beyond wins and losses. Let's decode exactly what Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu were really saying in that hallway, and what it tells us about the power struggle quietly tearing the bloodline apart from the inside. First, we need to understand why silence and posture carry such weight in this culture. In Polynesian and Samoan traditions, silence isn't weakness. It's a sign of restraint. Wisdom. Controlled power. When a man stays quiet in the face of disrespect, it isn't because he's afraid, it's because he knows the cost of his next move. Words may be loud. But silence? Silence is heavy. It makes people uncomfortable. It demands attention. When Hikuleo stood toe-to-toe with Jacob and didn't raise his voice, he wasn't diffusing tension, he was establishing dominance on his terms. That's the first layer. The second is the choice of words. This isn't your kingdom. Not, you're not the champ. Not, you don't belong here. The word kingdom changes everything. It elevates the conflict from personal to symbolic. The bloodline story has been built around royalty. Roman Reigns didn't just want to be a top guy, he demanded acknowledgement. The whole head-of-the-table concept was built on monarchy, one ruler, one throne, one bloodline. When Hikuleo said those words, he challenged the very structure that Roman, and now Jacob, built. He wasn't just denying Jacob a seat at the table, he was saying Jacob doesn't own the table at all. And here's the third layer, Jacob's reaction. There are 3 ways someone could respond in that moment: deflect it with aggression, which Fatu did not. Laugh it off with arrogance, which he also did not. Absorb it, internalize it, and decide how to return fire. Jacob chose the third. And for someone with his track record, that's chilling. In MLW, Jacob didn't cut long promos. He didn't play mind games. He brutalized people. If someone crossed him, they didn't get a second chance. So why didn't he strike here? Because he understood what was really happening. Hikuleo wasn't challenging him to a match. He was challenging his legitimacy. His right to lead. And in the world they both come from, that's a far deeper insult than any physical attack. Hikuleo was effectively saying, I know what you've done. But I know who you are. And I don't accept your crown. In many ways, that's a psychological nuke. Because Jacob has spent his entire career proving himself worthy of being feared and followed. He's fought in promotions where the spotlight didn't exist. Where you earned your name by surviving bloodbaths, not cutting promos. And now, just as he steps onto WWE's biggest stage, another man from the same legacy steps in and tells him he's not the one. That's not a rivalry. That's a power coup. But here's the fourth layer, the context around timing. This confrontation didn't happen randomly. It came exactly when WWE is repositioning its landscape. Roman Reigns is off-screen. Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins are holding down the main event on Raw. The tag division is wide open. And the future of the SmackDown hierarchy is in limbo. Someone has to fill the void. Jacob was positioned to do just that. His arrival was meant to signal a new chapter in the Bloodline's legacy, one built on a darker, rawer vision of dominance. And yet, before that narrative could solidify, Hikuleo made his move. Which tells us this wasn't just about respect or rivalry. It was about timing. Hikuleo waited for the right moment to step in and say, not so fast. He didn't jump Fatu the night he debuted. He didn't cut a promo in the ring. He chose the exact moment where Fatu's dominance was being accepted. Then he undercut it. That's strategic. That's dangerous. Fatu may be the more chaotic of the two, but make no mistake, Hikuleo is calculated. And that calculation sends shockwaves through WWE's landscape because it means this story isn't going to unfold in a predictable way. There won't be a contract signing next week. There won't be a brawl in catering. This is chess. And Hikuleo just made his opening move. Now let's talk about what this confrontation means in terms of power structure within the Bloodline. Even if Roman Reigns is gone, the influence of the Bloodline storyline still shapes WWE's hierarchy. Fans, wrestlers, and creative teams still measure current events in terms of how they relate to the family drama. It's no longer just a stable, it's a shadow that hangs over the company. That's why this moment matters so much. By confronting Jacob, Hikuleo isn't just setting up a feud. He's offering himself as an alternative vision of what the family should represent. And he's doing it without fanfare. Without manipulation. Without need for acceptance. He's saying, if Jacob thinks he's the next leader, he'll have to go through me. This reframes Hikuleo from a side character or potential enforcer to a main character in the family's legacy. And this is where we reach the fifth layer, the question of legitimacy. Jacob Fatu is a proven destroyer. But Hikuleo's claim to legitimacy may be even deeper. Why? Because of who raised him. Haku. The man known across locker rooms, continents, and decades as the toughest wrestler alive. The man who wasn't just feared in the ring, he was feared backstage. When Haku's name comes up, there's silence. Not reverence. Not awe. Fear. Hikuleo is Haku's son. That doesn't just carry weight. It carries expectation. He's not just a wrestler. He's an heir to something primal. Something untamed. And that might be the reason Hikuleo feels he doesn't need to scream his claim to leadership. He believes his blood speaks louder than Fatu's noise. So when he says this isn't your kingdom, he's not just making a statement about leadership. He's making a genealogical argument. He's saying, my father earned respect with his fists. Yours didn't teach you that kind of discipline. And now, we come to the sixth and most chilling layer, the implications for WWE's future. If Jacob Fatu and Hikuleo are on a collision course, and all signs say they are, this feud isn't just personal. It's generational. It could reset the bloodline. It could redefine SmackDown. It could set up years of stories involving younger family members, future tag teams, factions, even legacy tournaments. This feud has the potential to do what the original Bloodline saga did in 2020. Recenter the emotional heart of WWE around a real, ongoing power struggle grounded in truth and heritage. And here's the best part, it feels real. Because it's built on real dynamics. Real bloodlines. Real history. Real tension. There's no fantasy here. It's legacy versus legacy. Honor versus power. Silence versus chaos. Hikuleo versus Jacob Fatu. The last time WWE leaned this hard into the personal, it gave us years of iconic storytelling. This confrontation is the next spark. And every fan watching knows it. Because some fights don't start in the ring. They start in the silence that comes right before the empire burns. You've seen the footage. You've heard the words. You've felt the tension. Now it's time to ask the question that every wrestling fan, journalist, and even some superstars are quietly debating backstage: was this real? Or was it masterful storytelling? Because in WWE, the line between what's scripted and what's real has never been more blurred. The best feuds, Austin vs. McMahon, Punk vs. Cena, The Shield implosion, worked because they carried weight that felt unscripted. And the moment Hikuleo stepped in front of Jacob Fatu, that same kind of weight fell like a hammer. So what's the truth behind the tension? Let's start with what we know from reliable insider sources. Several backstage producers and talent handlers have confirmed that Hikuleo's arrival in WWE was planned for months. But the exact nature of how he'd be introduced remained fluid. He was kept off of official creative rundowns, wasn't assigned a brand, and was flown in under a different name to avoid leaks. That kind of secrecy isn't normal. But it's effective. It means WWE knew exactly what they had, a nuclear asset, best deployed under maximum surprise conditions. And then there's Jacob. Jacob Fatu's contract with WWE was finalized long before his surprise debut. But the timing of his appearance, and the impact he made on Night 1, suggest he was being positioned as a foundational piece in SmackDown's next era. He didn't just show up. He stamped his presence. Wrecked people. Took over segments. Immediately became must-see. So when two guys like that, both from the same bloodline, are introduced within weeks of each other, it raises a question: was this planned friction? Or is something off-script happening behind closed doors? Some insiders believe it's both. Let's examine both possibilities, and what each one means for the future of this storyline. The idea here is simple. WWE saw the opportunity to build a slow-burning legacy war between two very different interpretations of Samoan wrestling royalty. The vision? Not just another Bloodline spin-off, but something that actually surpasses it. Something darker. More grounded. More primal. From this angle, Hikuleo was never meant to support Fatu. He was always intended to oppose him. And the confrontation backstage wasn't improvised, it was the beginning of Act 1. A psychological chess game, kicking off with silence and body language rather than fists and fury. That would be genius storytelling. Why? Because it doesn't rely on title belts or authority figures. It leans into something deeper: family dynamics, cultural tension, and honor codes. The kind of material that gives wrestling emotional gravity. The kind of material that makes casual fans lean in and diehards hit rewind 5 times. And WWE has used this playbook before. Remember when the Shield exploded? It wasn't about championships, it was about betrayal, ambition, and brotherhood gone wrong. Or how about Roman vs. Jey in 2020? That wasn't just about tribal symbolism. It was about dominance through emotional submission. This confrontation between Hikuleo and Jacob could be the next evolution of that kind of storytelling. Not a copy. A mutation. Bigger. Angrier. Less polished. More real. WWE's long-term booking committee is said to be very high on both men. And that's critical, because you don't put 2 nuclear talents in a cold open like this unless you're building a war that will headline premium live events for months, maybe years. In that scenario, here's how things play out. Hikuleo and Fatu slowly build tension without direct matches. Promo packages drop, teasing their childhoods, their fathers, their divergent paths. Other family members are pulled into the story. Perhaps Solo. Perhaps Jimmy. Perhaps surprise appearances from old-school legends. The matches, when they finally happen, feel like collisions of destiny, not just bookings. And from a marketing perspective? It's gold. Merchandise. Documentaries. Specials on Peacock. You name it. WWE thrives on long arcs, and this has all the markers. But here's the counter-argument. Possibility 2. Real heat behind the curtain. There's another version of the story being whispered backstage. A version that paints this confrontation not just as a work of fiction, but as a powder keg of real-life tension. Let's break that down. While Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu share family ties, they didn't come up through the same circles. Hikuleo was raised in New Japan's strict dojo system. He learned the game through discipline, hierarchy, and silence. Jacob came up through MLW. Gritty, chaotic, and creatively open. That difference isn't just cultural, it's personal. Reports from backstage sources suggest that Hikuleo was not initially thrilled about how Jacob debuted. The spotlight. The monster push. The expectation that he would be the new leader of a reformed bloodline. There were even rumblings that Hikuleo felt the company was giving too much too fast to a guy who hadn't proven it in WWE yet. Meanwhile, Jacob reportedly didn't appreciate the idea that Hikuleo could walk in and stake a claim to a legacy that Fatu had been fighting to protect since day one of his own career. These aren't verified quotes. But they come from credible voices, trainers, producers, locker room vets. And if there is tension? That makes everything we've seen more electric. Because if real emotion is bleeding into the story, the unpredictability increases. You can't stage that kind of energy. You can't script a look that says, "I'm really not here to shake hands." You can feel it. In the eyes. In the posture. In the pacing. And that raises another question: is WWE leaning into real-life tension to enhance the product? Absolutely. They've done it before. Brett vs. Shawn. Edge vs. Matt Hardy. Punk vs. anyone. WWE is no stranger to taking real-world backstage energy and turning it into front-stage gold. And that may be exactly what's happening here. A hybrid model. Real heat, framed by smart booking, aimed at maximum impact. Which leads us to the final point: why this matters now more than ever. WWE is in a transitional era. Roman is off-screen. Cena's appearances are rare. Orton is semi-active. Cody Rhodes is holding it down, but fans are hungry for fresh conflict, real conflict. Not just title shots. Not just heel turns. Conflict rooted in meaning. Fatu vs. Hikuleo is that meaning. 2 men. Same heritage. Different philosophies. And a moment that split the locker room in half, because even the guys backstage don't know if this is business or personal. Maybe it's both. And that's the magic. That's the reason this feud could become the central axis of WWE's future. Because when fans don't know what's real, they watch closer. They talk more. They invest deeper. And that's how you build the next big thing. So whether this is pure fiction, or laced with backstage fire, one truth remains. WWE hasn't felt this unpredictable in years. And that's a good thing. There's a reason the moment between Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu hit harder than a steel chair shot. It wasn't just two big men in a hallway. It was heritage versus hunger. Bloodline versus battlefield. The son of a feared warrior versus the heir to a chaotic empire. This isn't just a wrestling feud. It's a civil war written in the language of legacy, and both men are fighting for something far bigger than airtime or belts. They're fighting for what the family name means next. Let's talk about heritage. Start with Hikuleo. He's not loud. He doesn't jump in front of cameras or hijack promos. That's because he was raised differently. Not in a performance center. Not in a weekly promo class. But in locker rooms and training dojos under the shadow of one of wrestling's most respected and feared figures, Haku. Haku isn't a legend because of catchphrases or merchandise sales. He's a legend because no one messed with him. In or out of the ring. Talk to old school guys, from Ric Flair to the Steiner brothers, and you'll hear the same thing. If Haku got mad, you hoped you weren't in the same building. He was loyalty. He was force. He was respect with knuckles. And Hikuleo was raised in that code. He wasn't taught to chase clout. He was taught to stand tall and let reputation speak louder than anything else. Every time he steps into a ring, he carries that weight. Every stare down. Every pause before a fight. Every decision not to speak until the moment demands it. To Hikuleo, legacy is earned through discipline. Now, contrast that with Jacob Fatu. Jacob is the product of a different kind of legacy. His father, Sam Fatu, aka the Tonga Kid, made his name in the 1980s, part of the same wave that introduced the world to the Wild Samoans. That lineage is connected to Rikishi, to the Usos, to Roman Reigns. Theirs is the bloodline that became the brand. The cultural phenomenon of dominance and tribal storytelling that helped define modern WWE. But Jacob didn't grow up with that spotlight. He didn't ride into NXT with hype videos and ceremonial music. He carved his own path in MLW, outside of WWE's machine. And he did it brutally. Jacob built his reputation by walking into smaller venues and turning them into graveyards. His matches didn't just win fans, they created fear. He didn't play the promo game. He let his body do the talking. His aerial moves were shocking. His explosiveness was unnatural. His ring IQ was slept on, until it wasn't. And now, he's arrived in WWE with all that fire behind him. But fire doesn't equal legacy. That's the difference. Where Hikuleo was forged, Jacob was unleashed. Where Hikuleo sees legacy as a responsibility, Jacob sees it as a right. And that philosophical split is the powder keg behind their confrontation. Because make no mistake, this isn't about jealousy. It's not about screen time. It's about what they believe the family name should stand for. To Jacob, legacy is dominance. It's who can impose their will. Who commands fear? Who throws the hardest punch and survives the deepest wound? To Hikuleo, legacy is honor. It's restraint. It's choosing your battles with intention, not noise. This is heritage versus hunger. Jacob is hungry to lead. Hungry to rule. Hungry to step into the void left by Roman Reigns and say, now, it's mine. Hikuleo is heritage. A walking reminder that legacy can't be claimed by ambition alone. That bloodlines aren't just about DNA, they're about how you carry them. And here's the twist, both men are right. That's why this is so compelling. There's no villain here. There's no cartoonish heel or overscripted babyface. There are just two men, standing on opposite sides of a burning family tree, each believing they're the rightful heir. And that makes this bigger than a match. This is a philosophy war. And it's drawing a line through the entire Samoan dynasty. You can already see the ripple effects. Watch how Solo Sikoa's character has evolved. He started silent, loyal, brutal. But now? He's watching. Calculating. Not jumping to Jacob's side. Not aligning with Hikuleo. Sitting in the middle. Waiting to see which version of the family's future wins. You think that's a coincidence? Look at the Usos. Jimmy is MIA. Jay is solo on Raw, dancing between nostalgia and reinvention. Neither one stepping into this firestorm, yet. Why? Because they've already seen what happens when the blood boils over. They've fought their own brother. They've watched their cousin break under the crown. Now they're watching two other family members prepare for war. And then there's the legacy outside the ring. The elders. The men who built this dynasty from the ground up, like Afa, Sika, Rikishi, even Dwayne Johnson. They're watching too. And that's not just speculation. Sources close to creative have hinted that WWE is considering legacy cameos. Not for nostalgia, but as judges. Think of them like tribal elders. Not to interfere, but to bear witness. Because what's coming isn't just another feud. It's the family putting itself on trial. Who represents the future? The man shaped by silence, raised by respect? Or the man forged in fire, demanding his throne? And when this explodes, and it will, who do the fans side with? That's the secret genius of this rivalry. It's not about who's stronger. It's about what kind of legacy the WWE Universe wants to see next. Do they want order or chaos? Silence or fury? Heritage or hunger? Because make no mistake, when Hikuleo said, "This isn't your kingdom," he wasn't just talking to Jacob. He was talking to us. To the fans. To the locker room. To everyone watching, waiting, wondering, who owns the future? And now, WWE has a new narrative axis. Not Roman. Not Cody. Not even Seth Rollins. It's Hikuleo. Jacob Fatu. One carrying tradition. The other storming through it. One with history in his veins. The other with fury in his eyes. And the kingdom? Still unclaimed. We've seen the confrontation. We've decoded the tension. We understand the stakes. Now the question that lingers like smoke in the aftermath of a fire is, what happens next? Not just between Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu, but for the entire landscape of WWE. This isn't a one-off. It's a shift. A realignment of power, legacy, and leadership inside the company's most iconic family. And every story moving forward is now connected to the outcome of this Cold War. So let's break it down. Not hypothetically. Not with vague hype. But with real scenarios based on WWE's patterns, backstage developments, and what these two men bring to the table. We'll lay out three major paths this story could take, and the massive consequences of each. The most obvious path is also the most dangerous. Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu stop playing chess. They start throwing punches. Not in the shadows, not behind the curtain, but in the center of the ring. And they pull others into it. This becomes a civil war in full view, with both men claiming to be the rightful future of the dynasty, and neither one backing down. Here's how it could play out. Jacob continues asserting his dominance on SmackDown. He runs through opponents, intimidates officials, and delivers promos framing himself as the one true heir to the bloodline. Not just in strength, but in vision. Hikuleo begins a parallel rise. He doesn't interfere, but he doesn't disappear either. He shows up at key moments, not to brawl, but to observe. He appears on stage. At ringside. In pre-match standoffs. Other family members are forced to pick sides. Solo Sikoa becomes the linchpin. Does he follow Jacob's fury, or Hikuleo's code? WWE leans into tribal symbolism. Not just theatrics, but philosophy. This becomes about who embodies the family's values, not who can win a fight. This scenario ends in a high-profile match at a major premium live event, likely SummerSlam or Survivor Series. And it won't just be billed as a match. It'll be a reckoning. The promos will be personal. The build-up will be brutal. There might even be no championship involved, because in this case, the name is the prize. This would be legacy storytelling at its peak. A full-circle evolution of the Bloodline saga, bringing in new blood but staying true to what made it powerful to begin with. But it's also risky. Because when you raise the stakes this high, you have to deliver. The match can't just be good, it has to be iconic. And WWE knows that. Which brings us to... Here's the swerve. What if Hikuleo's confrontation wasn't a declaration of war, but a test? What if this isn't your kingdom wasn't rejection, but challenge? Think about it. Jacob Fatu smiled. He didn't strike back. Hikuleo didn't follow up with violence. No one got laid out. No tables broken. Just a line, and a stare. What if that moment was about proving something? What if Hikuleo was saying, "You want to lead? Prove you deserve it." This could flip the script completely. Instead of tearing each other apart, the two monsters align, and form a new version of the Bloodline. Not a splinter group. Not an imitation of Roman's empire. But something primal. Something raw. A rebirth. Imagine Jacob Fatu and Hikuleo standing together, not out of friendship, but out of mutual purpose. Two different philosophies. One goal. It wouldn't be loyalty. It would be respect through violence. In this version, they act as co-commanders, leading a new wave of Samoan destruction. Solo Sikoa joins. They recruit a younger star from NXT or even NJPW. Maybe Zilla Fatu steps in. The faction becomes unstoppable. But the twist? There's tension within the alliance. Hikuleo watches Jacob constantly. Doesn't smile. Doesn't celebrate. Because deep down, he still doesn't fully trust him. It's not about love, it's about mission. This could give WWE a full year of slow burn tension, culminating in the inevitable betrayal down the road. And when that betrayal comes? It's nuclear. This path is all about timing. Keep them aligned just long enough to make the split devastating. It also allows both men to get dominant runs without sacrificing momentum early. A long play. And one WWE creative has used before, most recently with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, or even Sami Zayn in the Bloodline arc. Now for the most unpredictable version. What if this isn't just Hikuleo versus Jacob? What if this confrontation is just the opening move, and something else is coming? Here's the pitch: Hikuleo and Jacob are both contenders. Both alphas. But while they're circling each other, another figure steps in and takes control. Not Roman. Not The Rock. Someone unexpected. A new leader, born from the family tree, who forces both men to confront their place in the hierarchy. This could be someone like Zilla Fatu, Umaga's son, young, hungry, and full of potential. Or it could be Solo Sikoa, stepping fully into the void and saying, "Enough." In this version, the confrontation between Hikuleo and Jacob was meant to distract. It kept the audience focused while the real threat prepared to take the throne. Think about the chessboard. Hikuleo is the knight, calculated, observant. Jacob is the rook, powerful, aggressive. But Solo? Solo could be the king. Not by bloodline decree, but by positioning. He's been the silent weapon for over a year. Always in the background. Always watching. And now? With Roman gone, he has a chance to rise not through dominance, but through control. This could completely reshape the narrative. Jacob and Hikuleo both think they're next, but WWE pulls a reverse and builds toward a triple threat. Or even better, an uneasy alliance against Solo's rise to power. That kind of storytelling has weight. It mirrors real-life family dynamics. Generational battles. The idea that while two brothers fight for the crown, a younger sibling steps in and takes it. It's ancient. And in WWE? That kind of psychology hits hard. This scenario gives creative even more flexibility. It opens up paths for tag matches, betrayals, faction warfare. It creates ripple effects across SmackDown and even Raw. Because when family wars erupt, no one stays untouched. Now, let's consider the fallout from all three paths. In Total War, we get a legacy-defining rivalry that becomes a benchmark feud. In Alliance, we get a new bloodline, one that builds tension and combusts later. In Third Force, we get surprise, chaos, and realignment of the WWE hierarchy. Each scenario is viable. Each one builds momentum. And each one depends on how the audience responds over the next few weeks. So the real question might not be what happens next. But what should happen next? Because WWE is watching. They're watching reactions. They're reading comment sections. They're monitoring crowd energy. And they'll go where the fire is. If fans demand war, they'll get it. If fans want to see something new, something less black and white and more about power, then we could be watching the beginning of the most psychologically layered arc WWE's had in years. And that's why this story matters. It's not about titles. It's not about merchandise. It's about meaning. Because when two men like Hikuleo and Jacob Fatu stand face to face, they're not just cutting a promo, they're cutting a line through the soul of a legacy. And the next step? It's coming. Whether it's war, unity, or usurpation, something's about to break. And WWE will never be the same after it does.